The museum is really all about. It's about the
Awesome.
greatest generation, World War II generation. Yeah, and of course we highlight the American side, the US side. So basically, pretty much all of the airplanes that you see here are World War II era.
Okay. Even though, so Steve McQueen, did he serve during World War II, or was he just an instructor?
No, I think Steve McQueen is after World War II. But the General Lyon, who's the man that owns basically all of this, he's also an avid classic car collector, motorsports, into that. So as part of his collection, if you will, he also has some of the motorcycles that came from Steve McQueen's collection.
Oh, nice.
So that's why we have.
That's one is
Yeah, yeah, that one there, the Panther, and the one on the other side, which is a 1921 Harley Davidson.
Uh-huh.
I think, yeah, this also was owned by Steve McQueen at one time.
Oh, wow.
So that's why you see them here.
So this fortress, Flying Fortress right here, the
Yes.
Fudge Duddy, it served in which war theater?
World War II.
I'm like, versus Japan or Germany?
This one was built in Long Beach by the Douglas Company, even though it's a Boeing airplane. But it came off the assembly line in March of 1945.
Nice.
So it actually did not see, service. It's from that era, but it did not see actual bombing service from like England over to Germany. And this one is a recreation of the original Fighting Duddy.
Okay. What happened with the original one?
The original Fighting Duddy, if you see those red outlines towards the front, the little silhouettes of the bombs,
Yes.
the original Fighting Duddy had 93 successful missions
Wow.
over Germany, in Europe in World War II. And unfortunately, it was lost in a mid-air collision in December of 1944.
44.
But this one is a recreation of the original Fighting Duddy.
Oh.
Most of the airplanes that you see here at the museum, they are still flight-worthy, are survivors from that, but probably did not see actual combat duty because they would have been shot at, damaged, broken, lost, some crashed. But it is an original B-17G Flying Fortress.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed because there's a museum in Atwater, California. They have several versions of Flying Fortresses, much more advanced than this one. Seems like they're very costly, even in the Cold War era, to the point where they're still flying modern versions of it. I mean, like the Stratus, but it seems like it's an easy target for enemy fighters.
Well, yeah, I mean, anything that's this big, carries a heavy payload, is obviously big and slower than, single engine, fast flying, fighter airplane. They're also vulnerable to missile attack.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why maybe in more modern times you're seeing a shift away from the large bombers.
Yeah.
To
Just stealth.
drones.
Yeah.
That smaller, you don't have as many. These flew with like 10 people on board.
Oh.
Okay, they had a crew of 10. So anytime they were damaged or shot down, chances are you lost 7 or 8 guys. And so now we try to limit the losses to practically none.
Yeah.
in that respect.
Buddy Duddy survived a lot of missions. 98, you said.
93.
Oh, 93.
Yeah, that's quite a record. I mean, typically, if they could survive maybe 10, you're already doing very, very good. The survivability rate is
True. We just I think the latest movie I took her at was Midway, and seems like there's a portion where they're flying fortresses off aircraft carrier. Is that accurate? No.
off the aircraft carrier, you would have seen something like this, the B-25. Imperial Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in December 1941. So in February of 1942, just a couple of months after, the U.S. mounted a raid against Imperial Japan, and they put 16 of the B-25 on an aircraft carrier. The B-25 was never meant as a Navy airplane, but it was adapted for that particular mission. So in February of 1942, the U.S. actually bombed Imperial Japan. They had bombers over Tokyo, Osaka, and a few other cities. Didn't do a lot of damage, but it sent a message. It said, hey, you guys are you awakened the sleeping giant.
Yep.
Right?
When they dropped the bombs, did the Imperial nation realize that we should surrender, or it'll take a while, a couple of days before they completely surrender to the U.S.? Because it would send a clear message like, hey, you guys better stop.
After the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, it took a while, actually, not so much for the people, but the hierarchy. I think the Japanese emperor
To sink in.
still needed convincing, so then the second bomb was dropped a few days after in Nagasaki.
Yeah.
And then they figured out that this is, you really can't afford to keep, losing. So finally, they capitulated in the war.
True. But I never
Very
realized.
very tragic situation, that, I mean, of course, wars are not,
Yeah, it's not a pretty thing.
are always bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, it took a while. And actually, it's kind of a good thing that they finally realized what was happening, because those were the only 2 atomic bombs that the U.S. had.
What? I thought they were having a bunch of that before. The only 2 working ones, or 2 only made?
The only 2 that were made.
Whoa.
I mean, there would have been others kind of in different stages, but basically the 2, one was Big Boy and one was Fat Man, I think the 2. But that was pretty much it. It was the whole arsenal.
Was there like a plan B if they didn't surrender at that point? Like,
I think that they were trying to avoid an actual boots on the ground invasion, which would have been, I think, really devastating.
oh yeah.
For that. So they said, okay, if we have this enormous weapon, we'll probably stop the war sooner than an actual on the ground, fighting.
Yeah.
Type war.
Yeah, because I think in the documentary, America lost a lot of foot soldiers or American veterans at the first island at Japan. Was it Okinawa? Yeah, they really lost a lot of numbers.
Tremendous losses.
Yeah, because of the underground tunnels and whatnot, the booby traps, and the Bataan Death March. Yeah, that was horrific.
Yeah, plus the fact, for whatever reason, the Japanese were so indoctrinated that they were just not giving up.
Oh, yeah.
They would rather be slaughtered than to say, okay, you surrender. And,
Yeah,
terrible situation.
true. But would you say which one of the theater had the most casualty, the European side or the Asian side, as far as like U.S.?
I'm not exactly sure. I think they were both pretty bad. I understand that the U.S. casualties for World War II were like 450,000, men, military. But I don't know what the actual, what it was in the Pacific Theater versus the European.
Gotcha. Excuse me. I heard there's a car here by Hitler.
Yep.
Can you point us to it?
Sure. It's the Mercedes. It's on the far wall of the museum.
How did you folks manage to get your hands on it?
Well, since General Lyon is a pretty avid car collector, he had kind of contacts, and the car, the G4, the Mercedes G4, came from a collection in Las Vegas.
Ooh.
Someone had it. And I'm not exactly sure how they acquired it. At one time or another, after the war, it was brought over as a war prize from Europe to show people and for the bond drives. I think one of the movie studios needed it for a certain movie, so they kind of restored it in the back, and then it probably went to this collector in Vegas.
Gotcha.
And then for whatever reason, they needed to sell it. My understanding is that General Lyon acquired it. It was a lot of 5 different cars or military vehicles that this guy was selling for Vegas. And the general happened to have it. Being the military man himself, he was interested in having this artifact.
Okay.
But this is one of the original Mercedes G4 that Adolf Hitler would have paraded, actually, being on. And in fact, the front upholstery is still original. You see that it's kind of torn.
Wow, this is actually his.
To the period. So that guy, Adolf Hitler, would have actually stood up there and done his saluting and all this parading and everything.
It's a unique design.
Oh, yes, it is. Yeah.
Wow. I thought it would be like lowered, but it's raised.
Yeah.
So Was it intentional to be like an all-terrain vehicle?